Hello, everyone. Greetings and welcome from the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. My name is Nathan Yarosavage. I am a digital projects specialist and the production lead for the National Digital Newspaper Program at the Library of Congress, which is home of the Chronicling America Historic Newspapers Online Collection. I'll be the host for today's webinar on using Chronicling America for National History Day. Now, as many of you may know, Chronicling America is a website hosted at the Library of Congress that enables you to search and browse historical newspapers from across the country. With millions of US newspaper pages ranging from 1777 all the way to 1963, Chronicling America is a treasure trove for primary source research. Students have been using the newspapers in Chronicling America for many years now in the National History Day contest. And because of that, we're very excited to have such a great turnout today for today's presentation as we delve into using Chronicling America for National History Day projects this coming year and beyond. So with that said, please allow me to introduce our speakers for today's webinar. Amber Perenick is a reference librarian in the Serial and Government Publications Division. That's the area of the library that's home to the Chronicling America newspapers collection. Our other speaker is Mike Saley, a digital conversion specialist, also from the Serial and Government Publications Division, where he also works with Chronicling America as part of the NDNP, the National Digital Newspaper Program team. So Mike will be speaking first, so I'll turn it over to you, Mike, to get us started.
Thank you, Nathan, for the introduction. Hi, I'm Mike Saley, a digital conversion specialist at the Library of Congress. Before we begin talking about History Day, let's first begin by defining historical newspapers. What are they and how can you find them? Historical newspapers are newspapers published between the 17th to mid-20th century. They are known as the first draft of US history as recorded in the press. Furthermore, they may reflect the language and attitudes of their time. As a result, they may contain bias, offensive, and outdated words and images that may be hurtful to particular groups or people. Historical newspapers were first printed and then preserved as microfilm. Microfilm was a low-cost, reliable, long-term, standardized image storage medium. A growing amount of historical newspapers are now digitized and can be found online, free of access, while others are available through subscription databases. Viewing microfilm requires you to be on site. However, with digital newspapers, you can view newspapers from the comforts of your home. Furthermore, digitization is an important preservation measure that improves discoverability of newspaper content. Digitized newspapers are typically word searchable, while microfilm is not. This leads us to Chronicling America, one of the largest sources of digitized newspapers. Chronicling America is a searchable digital collection of historical American newspaper pages produced under the National Digital Newspaper Program, NDNP, a joint partnership between the National Endowment for the Humanities, NEH, and the Library of Congress. Under NDNP, state awardees from over 50 US states and territories submit digitized newspapers to be included in Chronicling America. While Chronicling America does not contain every newspaper title, the newspaper titles were selected to represent the state or territory's regional history, geographic coverage, and notable events. There are currently over 3,000 newspaper titles and over 19 million newspaper pages available, which greatly helps in research of historical topics such as those for National History Day, which leads to our next topic, National History Day. National History Day is a year-long academic program focused on historic research. It began in the 1970s as a contest where students ask questions, conduct research, analyze information, and draw conclusions while focusing projects towards a theme in order to reinforce the historical importance of a topic in shaping history. The theme is intentionally broad enough to allow students to select topics from any place, local, national, or global, and any period in history. Furthermore, National History Day has grown to become a multi-level contest from the county to state to national level. We will be talking generally about how historical newspapers can be used in National History Day research projects, while highlighting some tips and resources that can be useful for both students and educators in working with historical newspapers. So let's start by looking at the theme. This year's theme is Frontiers in History, People, Places, and Ideas. As mentioned before, the theme can be very broad. So the first thing I recommend doing is breaking down the theme into parts. Then take the main word and define and list its related terms. As seen on the screen, for this year's theme, Frontiers in History, People, Places, and Ideas, people, places, and ideas act as a modifier or subcategory for the theme. So you can set that aside for now. Based on the general definition of the word frontiers, we might probably start looking at people, places, and ideas related to borders, regions, or territories, such as those from early American settlements, the Wild West, or various territories. Based on a broader view of the term frontiers and its related terms, we may be looking at pioneers who push frontier boundaries and innovation in fields such as medicine, technology, communication, science, space, etc. Having a broad view of the theme is helpful, but be careful and make sure the connection to the theme is clear. That said, narrowing the theme to general ideas is just the first step. The next step is to take general ideas and narrowing them down to topics that can be developed into a historical argument or thesis. First, the topic must 1, fit the theme, 2, have a variety of potential resources, and 3, have historical impact. The final step is to develop a historical argument or thesis on the topic. The argument or thesis should explain the significance of the topic in relationship to the theme, act as a roadmap for the project, make a disputable claim, and lastly, arguments based on the disputable claim should be supported by historical evidence. The topic selection process can be difficult and sometimes repetitive. Some people may find themselves having to redo their selection topics due to lack of primary and secondary resources, lack of interest in the topic, or difficulty in creating a thesis. So here is an example. You look at the theme and decide your interests relate. Amber, can you go back? Okay, so one example, if you look at the theme and decide your interest related to the theme is women pioneers and innovators who stood at the frontier of science. You make a list of every woman you can think that fits this category, and after narrowing the names, you decide the topic will be Marie Curie, a physicist and chemist who discovered 2 chemical elements, radium and polonium, and won the Nobel Prize twice. After doing a quick search on Chronicling America for her name, you realize she has a lot of articles written about her. You even find books in your public library's online catalog about her. After reading about Marie Curie and her husband, you decide your disputable argument and thesis would be Marie Curie's recognition and success at the frontier of science was only possible with her husband by her side due to gender bias. While this thesis relates to the theme and makes a disputable claim, you still need to find historical evidence that can support it. If you can't, then you have to step back and find another topic or redo your thesis. If you're having trouble thinking about initial topics, we recommend checking some of the resources at the Library of Congress. Next slide. At the Library of Congress, the Serial and Government Publications Division has prepared over 360 topics in Chronicling America research guides featuring historical events, people, and even places. We have further organized the topics by date, subject categories, and even themes in American history. You can access this page at guides.loc.gov/chronicling-america-topics. For this year's theme of the frontier, we recommend looking at our discovery or exploration theme category, or the American enterprise, industrialization, and development, and technology and innovation subject categories. Each topic in Chronicling America's research guide follows a specific format. Each contains a brief summary, a timeline of events, search strategies, and selected articles to help inspire and jumpstart the topic selection process. This is an example of the Alaskan Gold Rush, Topics in Chronicling America Research Guide. This topic can fit within National History Day's theme of the frontier with respect to the Alaskan Territory. However, a deeper dive and analysis into the topic and its related resources needs to be performed in order to develop a historical argument or thesis. After selecting a topic related to the annual National History Day theme, additional research of primary and secondary resources is needed to help create a thesis. In dealing with historical newspapers, we will first begin by defining primary and secondary sources. Then we will explain some of the issues in using historical newspapers and some tips and suggestions to alleviate these issues. So good research should have a variety of primary and secondary sources. The distinction between using newspapers as primary and secondary sources is not always as straightforward as it may seem. A source may be considered primary in one research context, but secondary in another research context. For newspapers, primary resources are typically created by the people at the time of the event. They may provide conflicting perspectives, accounts, or opinions, and they're essential for understanding an event or time because they were created by the people who experienced it. Likewise, secondary sources are created by someone who did not participate in the event. Secondary sources use and cite primary sources, and for historical research, secondary sources are generally scholarly books and articles. Lastly, they help build the historical research from multiple perspectives and give historical research context. For research purposes, both primary and secondary sources play essential parts in providing perspective and analysis on a topic. That said, sources should be analyzed before you decide on their selection to use for your argument. So newspapers can be an exciting source to use. However, before committing yourself to an article, first analyze it and ask yourself if it comes from a reliable source, if it has relevance to your topic, whose perspective or opinion is it presenting, and if there are missing or excluded perspectives. Analyzing each newspaper article forces you to continue looking for additional sources to support your arguments and can help you find the most effective sources to present your thesis. So unfortunately, there are some issues with historical newspapers. Four common issues include first, historic vocabulary. This means words can change over time and you may not find what you're looking for unless you use the correct vocabulary. Current terms and terms used in the past may yield different numbers in your results. Also, different regions may refer to events, names, and places differently. Secondly, there may be difficulty in identifying authors and their perspectives. Most bylines in historical newspaper presence, most bylines in historic newspaper articles are not present. Third, articles written in the moment sometimes have incomplete information or statistics. For example, a topic spanning multiple days will require more research analysis to ensure information is correct. Sometimes newspaper will post corrections to their articles, sometimes they won't. And lastly, opinions by opposing parties may not be fully or accurately represented. For example, newspapers written for and by various ethnic or labor groups will focus on their audience and their concerns rather than the concerns of the general public or opinions of news that do not represent their interests. So here are some ways to deal with the issues dealing with newspapers. First, establish context and remind yourself the newspaper articles came from a particular time and space in history. Consider what was happening politically, socially, economically, or culturally, and if any of that could relate to the newspaper article, potential bias the newspaper may have, or how people, events, and ideas were portrayed. Second, read articles that ran several days after the event happened, as more information became available, and seek articles from different newspaper titles. Third, Use additional types of sources, including secondary sources, to establish historical context and validate numbers and statistics. Lastly, if the newspaper is on Chronicling America, you can find additional information about a newspaper's perspective by looking at the title essay. This helps in identifying potential publisher bias, which leads to the next topic. Newspapers selected for digitization and inclusion in Chronicling America by NDNP partners are accompanied by title essays. These title essays contain basic information about the paper, including its scope, content, and significance. This can help identify potential bias and perspective from the publisher. It can detail title or publisher changes due to mergers or closures, and can provide historical context. Click. Here is an example of The Sun, a newspaper title provided by the Minnesota Historical Society. This essay describes the newspaper as being unabashedly democratic while also featuring agricultural news, information, and advice to farmers. Further along the essay, the editors are described as having exchanged insults with a rival newspaper, claiming they indulged in the luxury of lying by publishing content without much thought or reflection. So title essays like these can be very important sources to review. A list of all title essays can be found by going to the All Digitized Newspaper list and selecting Show All Digitized Newspapers. From there, a list will populate. If the more information value contains a yes, then that newspaper title has an essay. You can also get to this page by going to chroniclingamerica.loc.gov/newspapers. Now let's transition to a more in-depth look into Chronicling America with my colleague, Amber Perenick.
Thank you, Nathan and Mike. Chronicling America users have the option of performing basic or advanced searches, and I'll give examples of both. I have no doubt that you will come up with some search strategies of your own. The basic search box is designated as the blue Search Pages tab and is found on many of the pages of the site. To begin, go to the landing page, chroniclingamerica.loc.gov, and type keywords into the blue search box. I'll use the example of Bessie Coleman. According to the African American National Biography, Bessie Coleman was an American aviator, born in January 1892 in Atlanta, Texas. After being rejected by a number of American aviation schools because she was a Black woman, she went to France in 1920. On June 15, 1921, Coleman received her pilot's license, the first awarded to an American woman by the French Fédération Aéronautique Internationale. She became the only licensed African-American woman pilot in the world. Coleman died on April 30th, 1926 in Orlando, Florida, United States at Paxson Field. Basic search options are limited to state, time period, and keywords located near each other. The basic search returns all supported languages, and at present, newspapers published in 19 languages are available. The results listed first are most likely to be relevant to your search. Results will appear higher in the list when they contain either exact matches of your search terms, more of your search terms, repeated search terms, and search terms that occur near each other. This article from the Cusco Times is about Coleman's departure for Europe. A couple of things to point out from this screen. The keyword search terms are highlighted. The title of the newspaper appears at the top, along with the institution that provided the microfilm used to create the digital file. And the citation appears at the bottom of the page. Don't forget to save what you find. Download the PDF of the page or use the clipping tool to get a smaller section. Zoom in on the section you want, press the blue scissors symbol, and save a clipping of your image. This article from the Bellington Progressive is about Coleman's return from Europe. Because language changes, be sure to use search terms used at the time the materials were created, even if those terms are now obsolete. For example, the following historic terms will produce more results than their modern-day counterparts. For instance, for gas or service station, use filling station. For African American, use Afro-American or Negro. And for voting rights, use suffrage. Use the names of towns, landmarks, bridges, buildings, and other geographic features that were current when the materials you are searching were created. For instance, the state of Oklahoma was referred to as both Indian Territory and Oklahoma Territory prior to its admission as a state, so searching for Indian Territory may produce more search results if searching on topics related to Oklahoma. This time, I used an extra word in the search box to narrow down my list of results to only include articles with the words Bessie and Coleman and aviatrix, a term used for a woman aviator during the first half of the 20th century. When you're using this resource, you may come across some terms that may reflect racist and xenophobic opinions and attitudes. When researching historical materials, especially newspapers, it is often necessary to use language in common use at the time of publication. Historical newspapers reflect the opinions and attitudes of their time. These pages often contain biased, offensive, and outdated words and images that are now understood to be harmful. As responsible researchers, we should acknowledge and be mindful of how these terms oppressed groups of people, and we take great care in using these terms to conduct research in the present. Remember to always cite your sources. It gives credit to the source of your information. Chronicling America makes it incredibly easy to cite your sources. For instance, to cite this article about Coleman's involvement as a stunt artist from the Chicago Whip, simply copy the citation below the newspaper image, paste it, and you're done. You can read more about the history of a particular newspaper title, for instance, The Monitor, published in Oklahoma, Nebraska, by clicking on the linked title above the digitized page. From this page, you can learn more about the publication's history, publishing frequency, and its editor and publisher, if known. You can also browse all available digitized issues in the calendar view and discover where you can find additional holdings. You might also want to expand your search beyond her life. For this search, I limited to articles published from 1926 to 1963, when the content in Chronicling America currently ends. As you can see from the list of results, many articles were published after her death, and her legacy lives on. The advanced search option allows you to narrow your search to a specific newspaper, a specific date range, to the day rather than year, and gives you many more options for how to enter keywords and phrases. To limit searches to a specific language, choose the appropriate language from the drop-down menu. And please note, not all languages that appear in the newspapers have language-specific analysis tools implemented. Other reasons for language search may be content related. For example, you might want to search Spanish titles for articles about the building of the Panama Canal, which may convey a different perspective than reporting in the English-speaking press. Consider the example of Clara Brown, a former enslaved woman from Virginia and Kentucky who became a community leader and philanthropist and aided the settlement of former slaves during the time of Colorado's gold rush. She was known as the Angel of the Rockies and made her mark as Colorado's first Black settler and prosperous entrepreneur. According to the Journal of African American History, her story of courage enriched the tapestry of the American experience. Chronicling America can provide key sources about Brown's life. To begin, go to the landing page again, chroniclingamerica.loc.gov, and click on the Advanced Search tab. To find Clara's obituary, you will narrow the date range from a few days before her death to the end of the following month, just in case it's unknown by the newspaper. For this example, I'll limit to articles published in October 1885 through the end of January 1886. To narrow the search, select the state of Colorado, where Brown lived at the end of her life. I did not find any specific mentions, unfortunately, within the Colorado content at the moment, so I expanded my search to view how other newspapers around the country reported her death. When looking at newspaper articles, you may want to consider where many perspectives and points of view, such as who wrote the article and who published it. Is there any kind of bias? What other perspectives can you find? A note of caution, full-length articles usually list a person's name in order, whereas death notices often list the last name first. Sometimes a middle name is used and sometimes just an initial. With all the variations that a name can take, you may not want to search for a name as a phrase. The proximity search allows you to search for the first name within 5 words of the last name, which should pick up all of those variations. To do a proximity search, enter your keywords into the with the words search box, and then select a numeric value for how close the words should be together. This type of search can be helpful in narrowing results on a given person, place, or event to a specific aspect of that person, place, or event. Another tip for old newspapers. For articles on married women, try searching their husband's name as well. Women were often in newspapers, were often written about in newspapers as Mrs. Husband's name. Then enter the keywords, in this case, Clara Brown. Note that you might need to search different variations of a name when researching. She was also known as Aunt Clara Brown and Angel of the Rockies. Some other tips to mention, common words such as and, not, and the are ignored by the search engine. In the case of letters is ignored as well. So I can simply type Clara Brown. Many of the articles I found about her death were the same, and this is an example of a syndicated newspaper article. At the top, you'll see the note, Denver Correspondence. It's important to note why a particular title might have reported the news differently. Her death was reported on the front page of the Kenosha Telegraph issue on November 13, 1885. Have a look to see what else is on the page. An opinion column, a game, an advertisement. These items can help you understand the context of that time period even more. To search for phrases in newspaper articles, first, select the Advanced Search tab and enter your phrase in the appropriate with the phrase search box. When searching for a phrase, enter the words in the order they were most likely to occur. The order of the search words does not affect the scope of the search results, but it will affect the order of their display. In this example, I typed in Aunt Clara Brown as a search phrase. Sometimes you can have too much of a good thing. If you search all of Chronicling America with a name, you might get back more than what you expect. Learning some basic dates of when someone lived in a place or the dates of important milestones can help you to narrow down your searches. If a search generates too many results, try using more specific terms and or limiting to a specific state of publication or a particular newspaper title. Use the search box options in combine to narrow your results. If a search generates too few results, try alternate terms or broader subjects and relax any limiting criteria such as date ranges and language and state limitations. If you need more help, you can find useful information on the Chronicling America help page. Here are some links to helpful guides for preparing for your National History Day projects. As Mike mentioned earlier, the new Topics in Chronicling America research guides LibGuide can be found at guides.loc.gov/chronicling-america-topics. This research guide gathers together the collection of topical guides that tell various stories of America through the newspapers available in Chronicling America. Topics pages are great for learning more about what can be discovered by researchers, including you. Chronicling America users can now browse the collection using a recently launched interactive map and timeline. The new Exploring Chronicling America Newspapers application is updated weekly and dynamically maps publication locations of the almost 4,000 digitized newspapers currently available in the online collection. This page includes links and descriptions to several different types of interactive maps, graphs, and charts designed to assist users in better understanding the scope and coverage of newspapers in Chronicling America. Additional digital newspaper collections are searchable through the library's website at loc.gov/newspapers/collections. You can either opt to search through all digitized newspapers through the search box displayed at the right hand corner of the landing page, or you can search the collections individually. Additional collections include Frederick Douglass newspapers, Japanese American internment camp newspapers, New York Journal and related titles, Stars and Stripes, the American Soldiers newspaper of World War I, World War history newspaper clippings, and newspaper pictorials, World War I rotogravures collections. The Headlines and Heroes blog highlights the amazing stories of famous, infamous, and everyday people that we find in Chronicling America and elsewhere, and you can subscribe at the top of the page. And to receive updates about new content, research, and reuse of Chronicling America, go ahead and click on the subscribe button at the top right-hand corner of the page. Be sure to follow Chron AM LOC to see our daily tweets based on historic events and what happened on this day in history. These may inspire you to research or look further in Chronicling America. Be sure to follow, like, and retweet. Thank you for attending today's presentation. To recap, the Chronicling America Historic Newspapers online collection is a product of the National Digital Newspaper Program and jointly sponsored by the Library of Congress and the National Endowment for the Humanities. Here you can search digitized historic newspapers published between 1777 and 1963. You can search for specific keywords and limit your search by state, publication, date ranges, and other factors. Chronicling America includes news articles covering various topics, from the 1893 Chicago World's Fair to the 1912 Titanic sinking to the 1918 armistice that ended World War I, aka the Great War. The newspapers cover both national events and local issues. Newspapers are one of the greatest ways to learn about documented history, and Chronicling America allows people to interact with history and gain a greater understanding of it. Not to mention, it's a great resource and database to search for stories of people in history, and it can be an excellent way for students to hone their research skills as well. Find a topic that fascinates you. Research is always more fun when you're interested in what you're searching for. If you have any additional questions, please contact us through our Ask a Librarian link or visit the reading room in person.